Twin flame energy. Twin flame energy. Twin flame energy. Twin flame energy.
All right, welcome back to Twin Flame Energy Podcast. I am your host, AJ.
And I am your co-host, Damo. We are live streaming tonight on Twitch, and this is podcast number 17. The title of this podcast is Healthy Compromises.
Healthy compromise.
C.
Okay. Well, let's go to the first article. That comes from thesource.org. And the title of the article is Here's What Compromise Looks Like in a Healthy Relationship. Okay. So, compromise is the settlement of differences by mutual cessation. Compromise doesn't mean you completely agree with your partner or vice versa. It's healthy to maintain your personal values, beliefs, opinions, and preferences while still meeting halfway. Not everyone is taught how to compromise from young, so one or both people in a relationship can struggle to meet halfway. So here are some ways you can practice healthy compromise in your relationship.
Number 1, the sacrifice is mutual, not one-sided.
Number 2, there's good intent.
Number 3, both people maintain their unique identities.
Number 4, remember, communication is the cornerstone of every compromise.
It's very true, you know?
Yeah.
Compromise isn't easy, nor is it something you were born knowing to do well. Be patient with yourself and your friends or your partner. Some compromises are going to challenge your relationship. Others may feel easy. Just preserve and be as consistent as you can. Once you understand and you can implement compromises in your relationship, you may begin to notice some significant changes. Over time, the word compromise won't feel negative or scary at all, but rather a vital ingredient to your happy union. All right, as I change my page. Oh, and it's still me. So the second article comes from medium.com. The title of this article is How Much Should You Compromise in a Relationship? Cell phone.
That wasn't mine. That was just some noise.
Compromise isn't surrender, and making compromises is a core part of the human experience.
Compromise build our friendships, our work relationships, our whole approach to life, and yet everything we know about them seems to go out the window. As soon as we start a romantic relationship, when we fall in love, compromise becomes a dreaded word that summons doom and gloom. When we're not in a perfect agreement with our partner, we feel like we're failing. Some people will approach every conflict like it's a battle. Others will just shrug and say, whatever you want, honey, without realizing how badly that could damage a relationship.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts is that some people always want you to just say, whatever, honey, and keep it moving.
But that's how things are supposed to work. There's a certain level of stuff men just don't have a high enough IQ for.
Well, so the third article.
We're not there yet. We have a whole little area there that I'm still talking. Just got here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
This will be a 3-minute podcast if I let you, So, next part here that I have is what compromise in a relationship is all about. Positive compromise should bring partners closer together and enrich their connection. Unhealthy compromise, on the other hand, creates an ever-expanding gap between partners. Each side gravitates towards preserving its own interests, and they can get entangled in complicated mind games instead of just talking it out. So, what does a positive compromise look like exactly? As long as you're keeping score, everything will turn into a competition. Constantly competing with your partner is always exhausting. Instead, you can settle for a compromise without giving in or pushing your partner to give in. Here's what you need to do.
Number 1, stay focused on the bigger picture.
Number 2, practice empathy.
Number 3, find a middle ground.
Yep. Only 3 little steps. Now, what is your idea of focusing on the big picture?
Like sometimes you have a certain way that you want it to flow, and I have a certain way I want it to flow, but it's like sometimes we have different approaches that can achieve the same ultimate goal. And it's sometimes if we just focus on that, we could reduce the amount of conflict thinking that the other person is trying to go to a different direction. So yeah.
Gotcha. Practice empathy. Empathy is one of those words that I feel, I don't know, it's hard for people to really resonate with that word. Like, everybody's good with sympathy because it's like tapping into things that you've already experienced. You could be like, oh my gosh, that happened to me. Oh, it hurts. Yes, it hurts. But then empathy, I think, goes above and beyond what people think it is. Like, people think that because, if someone has somebody in their family die, they say they empathize because they're like, oh, if you haven't had that happen to you, I can't, it hasn't happened to me, but I can dream about if it did happen to me, that would be so sad. But in a lot of cases, I think the ultimate empathy is to be able to show, not grace, but just give the other person room to work through whatever they need to work through. Right. Even if you literally can't relate, you can't understand it. Yeah. You're like, that makes no sense that is even bothering you, but I'm going to allow you the space to work through what you need to work through and not put myself in a position to just look at you like you're stupid. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not always for you to understand. Yeah. Because you're understanding.
Like, you could be like, hey, when you make chocolate chip cookies, it makes me want to cry because it reminds me of something, and you're like, what? Chocolate chip cookies or whatever. But it can mean something to one person and absolutely nothing to someone else. So,
right, literally.
And your thoughts on finding the middle ground?
Finding the middle ground is, it's kind of compromising to your methods of getting to the first one, staying focusing on the big picture. So the middle ground is, you want to go this way, I want to go this way. So let's find some way that we can maneuver to where we both feel comfortable in meeting our big picture goal. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That's just simple as that to me.
The big thing about that is when you find the middle ground, both parties should feel like they can easily pinpoint a spot where they have compromised. Right. Because if one person feel like they're doing all the compromising, and the other person's like, well, we found a middle ground. They'd be like, what did you give up? Nothing. It's like, well, then it's not a middle ground.
It's a balance. Yeah. It's a balance and all of that. Yep.
Yes. So, an exercise in communication. Once you start looking at a compromise as a negotiation, you'll begin to feel less stressed out. My way or the highway attitude sends partners adrift. No matter how hard you or your partner try to win arguments, the conflict will keep on piling up and nobody will really be happy. Compromises shouldn't be that big of a deal, but when two people learn how to balance them reasonably, okay? Right. If that's not the case, then one of you is constantly evading compromise and being abstinent. I'm trying to read in this lovely lighting we have here. Yeah, abstinent. Thanks for the light. then it might be time to reconsider what your relationship is all about.
Right.
You know?
Right. All right. So now we're going to the third article, and that comes from psychologytoday.com. And the title of the article is How Much Should You Compromise for Your Relationship? So, let me see. All right. The goal for anybody looking for a relationship is to find that special someone who completes you, who meshes with your personality and character so well that you coexist in perfect harmony. This is not to say that you're identical with the other person, but you complement each other like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. A perfect fit that creates a new wonderful entity. A healthy relationship should affirm who each partner is and allow each person to meet his or her needs together with the other. A less relationship demands that one or both partners change in a deep and meaningful way to meet the needs of the other, which compromises one or both of the persons involved. In such cases, the compromise serves the relationship, which is backwards. The relationship should serve the persons in it.
That's interesting.
Yep.
So I wonder what the difference is between, I mean, what does it look like when it just serves the relationship and not the person?
Right.
You know?
Right.
Any thoughts on that?
I don't know. I guess it's just a matter of.
We should have asked Google.
Well, no. I mean, I just think it's fulfilling that self journey type thing aspect of what a relationships mean to that person, I guess.
Yeah, but it's not even, if it's not serving the people, then how is it just serving the relationship? Is it like a face value thing, how we look to other people as a power couple type situation?
Probably,
versus making sure both people in the relationship are actually happy? Maybe?
Probably.
Possibly?
Yep, probably. That's literally probably what it is. It sounds like it.
I guess. So, let's see here. Let's consider an example of excess compromise involving two important components of most relationships: emotional and physical intimacy. They're not the only two, of course, but for most people, I think it's pretty high on their list and represents intrinsic desire that a healthy relationship should help fulfill. If the partners in a relationship agree on a relative importance of these two, whether one is more important than the other or they're equally important, then all is good and the partners can mutually satisfy their needs. But if the partners disagree on the relative importance of them, if one values physical intimacy more while the other needs emotional intimacy more, then it may be more difficult for the relationship to meet both partners' needs without creating stress or breeding resentment. I say may because often physical and emotional intimacy go together, as in love making that joins the physical and emotional. So the differences in the priorities might not manifest themselves since both partners are getting what they need from the same act.
Right.
But when the partners cannot find a way to satisfy both needs at the same time, they may start to resent having to satisfy the needs of the other person while leaving his or hers needs unfulfilled. If a need is an essential part of who a person is, leaving it neglected will only breed resentment and pain.
Yeah. Yep. That all seems very, very true.
So, yeah. I really think that, I don't know, the whole idea of compromise, I think, is underrated. I think that we, how I always say, like, me personally, I feel like for many, 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 many years, the idea of self-care didn't exist. Self-care is like a 2010 and forward idea that has just like swept the world.
Right.
But it's put us in a position where a lot of people are obsessed with it to the point where it doesn't really leave room to have an actual like bond with another person, because like self-care is just like, you know what I'm saying, like they're like,
it's become imbalanced.
you want orange walls and I want red walls, but my chi is better with red, so we must part ways. Like stupid stuff like that.
It's become imbalanced a lot in media,
but
because
the imbalance happens because it was imbalanced before people didn't care about self-care at all.
Well,
the whole housewife era of the 50s and forward, women really didn't get a chance to really care about themselves. They just had to do. But on the flip side, I believe men were the same way, because it was really about status and how they were supposed to be versus what actually made them happy.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, it's I don't know, it's tough because people who really have that current issue, who is within this generation of the change, first, you know what I mean? It makes it hard, because then you're like, am I supposed to feel this way, or am I supposed to care about this, or does that make me selfish, or does that, then you start to question what you're doing overly,
right?
Because it's like you're trying to balance it out by being in a relationship and being a partner and being, you know what I mean, and and I guess this is my thing, because I have an issue with self, so it's like I'm trying to maneuver that, but then you got the media saying like, like damn near narcissistic about how everything's supposed to be.
Right.
And if you ain't doing that, then you're not fulfilling you, and you're doing something wrong by being in that relationship. And it's like, but do we ever care about the other person? That's kind of what you think about.
Yes.
After a while, because that's how the media is.
Well, it's just like my beloved Janet Jackson said on the Tamita Joe album. If you haven't heard it, you suck. The magic hour. Okay, I think about the magic hour all the time, and the magic hour obviously is like, it's the sun transition moments, basically. Sunrise, sunset, and so in a lot of cases, I feel like the people who have reached the level of balance with like self-care and selflessness, especially people who have like families, like husbands and children and things like that, are the people who are those 5 a.m. club people that literally get up and they're like, from 5 to 7 I meditate, I do yoga, I take my breathing, I light candles.
Those perfect individuals, right?
I hate that word perfect.
I know.
So don't say it. Like, I'm something it, triggered when you said it.
Right, I'm saying it.
It's not perfect, because perfect is
purpose.
Unattainable. So the idea is that that's unattainable. And that's not unattainable. That literally is the definition of just having some freaking discipline, which 90% of us don't have.
Yeah, I was just saying it to trigger that. Like, you know what I mean? In a way.
Because this is my dream.
That's how
it is my dream to be a 5 a.m. clubber.
Yeah.
They spend 2 hours showing themselves love, and then by the time their kids wake up, they have so much to give because they've given so much to themselves. So the thing about it is, we can't really be mad at everybody else if we didn't do what it takes to replenish ourselves. And then we're like, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for that. But it's like, but at the same time, when something's important, you make time.
Right.
So is it, what was that, 3 or 4 episodes ago or 2 episodes ago? The addiction to struggle.
Yeah.
The reason why we don't do it.
Go back and listen if you haven't.
I don't know what number of podcasts that was, but
it was over there.
Yeah. The addiction to struggle could be the very reason why so many of us don't do it.
Right.
But once we could break through that, Yeah. I think if we took like a 30-day challenge, which isn't happening right now, so I'm not suggesting it, but a 30-day challenge to become a 5 a.m.er, which sounds so painful. Man. It sounds like it would be so wonderful in terms of the benefits, but my eyeballs bleed just thinking about it.
Well, that's because there's so much life that's happening around that that makes that kind of impossible at the moment.
Well, I've done it before. See, I know what it feels like. I have woken up at 5 a.m. And meditated and stretched and lit incense. It feels great. But when I did it, I think I went back to sleep afterwards. I didn't have to go to work. Right. You know what I mean? So the idea of doing that and then really like starting your day with a hustle and bustle, that scares me. Yeah. Because then I'll just, so sleepy, Lord.
I guess the key is making sure that you're getting actual sleep so your body is well rested. That's probably one of the most common things that people lack.
Exactly.
You know, and people probably feel like, man, I sleep, man, shoot, you won't talk 10 hours. Yeah, but are you getting actual rest?
Right.
Are you getting sleep? Are you going to that state of sleep to where your body heals, or are you just kind of there?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And that could affect a lot of things and make a lot of things impossible, and then your future get jacked up, you know, because you've had a lack of sleep for so long, you know.
And you know that firsthand.
I do. Yeah. So, but
it's your turn.
This may seem obvious, but it is hard to keep this in mind while entranced by the transcendent bliss of new love. When we're willing to give up anything and everything to be with the other person, and you don't appreciate the cost of what you're giving up, the same thing can happen at the end of the relationship when you push all the pain down and promise the world if only the other person will give you another chance. And sometimes these incapabilities and compromises aren't even apparent. Early in a relationship, maybe they don't care or don't come to the surface until you've moved it together, for instance. But once they do manifest themselves, they cannot and should not be ignored. Not if the relationship is going to last, if it should. So the bottom line is, little compromises are natural and unavoidable, but be careful not to give up too much of what is important to you for the sake of the relationship. Should help to affirm who you already are.
Yeah, I think if two people can, and it's funny because I know it takes this whole thing about romance and spontaneity and stuff like that is a load of crap, because I feel like all it has done is open the door for people to have the worst expectations of what things should be. Because the stuff that actually will make your relationship work isn't glamorous and cute. Like sitting down, having conversations, writing down lists, making sure you're both aware of love, what your like hard stops are, what you're flexible in, what is very important to you, what you're willing to give up. Yeah. You know, all those things you need to know about the other person. And those aren't attractive conversations. Yeah. But, you know, like, it's funny because...
But they're necessary.
We've been taught, like, for example, as a woman, you can be like, I love flowers, and I wish my husband would get me flowers every Friday. That's not me. This is an example. The moment he starts giving you flowers every Friday, it doesn't feel the same because you technically told him. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like, well, it's not like it was his idea or spontaneous. But how do you expect somebody to live like that?
I guess
they won't know unless you tell them, but then you're mad that they're doing exactly what you told them to do.
But it's a tie between, though, when you're in a relationship where you don't know what that person likes. So at some point you have to learn that person. You have to understand that person. And not all the time you could just say, oh, I listen to everything. I listen to everything you say. You've never once said, I love flowers. You know what I mean? Sometimes that can be the case. So there's those times where it's needed to have that conversation of, you know, what's some things that you like? You know,
Right.
but make it a point to have that conversation, because you could be in a relationship for 5 years and never know that favorite food of the other person.
And it can change.
Because,
so have them often.
how life flows, it's like, well, I was eating grapefruit and oatmeal for, years. And then I decided that I'm just going to start eating what I really love to eat. And then you're like, wait, what? I thought you love oatmeal and so it becomes a thing, I guess.
we don't know everything. Like, you could know
Right.
your favorite food today could be mac and cheese. And then in 2 years, you go somewhere and you have something. And now your
Now it
favorite
changed.
food is mashed potatoes. I don't know. Something else.
Right. Right.
So it
happens.
it's almost like you really need to have these conversations, even like monthly.
I think as you get older, you begin to not have a favorite food. You begin to have a food of what you want right now.
Right. Which makes perfect sense.
You know what I mean? So that's a whole, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But what we're going to do is we're going to enjoy this quick music break, and we will be right back.
When you pay attention to your life, you change. I've been having visions of my life, you change. Making simple changes in my life, you change. Paying more attention to my life, you change. When you give yourself another view, many different levels, different views. I can see my treasures in my view. Let me take a second to review. There ain't nothing that can stop me. Doesn't matter what's in front of me. I'm not gonna take it lightly. I can manifest what I see. Everything you wanna do, I make a decision, I move. I am not afraid to lose. I know where I'm headed to. I ain't thinking about nothing. Nothing. 'Cause my body's got me in I ain't thinking about nothing. Nothing. Ooh, 'cause I'm nice.
And every time I wanna get, yeah. And every time I wanna say, yeah. Now I'm labeled as reckless. Now I look inside your eyes to stress. I'm not about to weep beside no man. Everything I want's inside of me, dormant. I just wanna find a key so I can open. I just wanna keep my mind open. There's a place I need inside of me the moment. All I gotta do is self-address something. There's a better way to diagnose your origin. I don't wanna make a scene though I'm flowing. I'm the master of my DNA focus. Anywhere I wanna be is just in my grasp, yeah. I ain't thinking about nothing. I ain't thinking about nothing, yeah. I ain't thinking about nothing. I'm in a daze, I'm in a daze, I'm in a daze, I'm in a daze, oh.
Nothing. Ooh, 'cause my body's got me I ain't thinking about nothing. 'Cause my mind's in the daze.
My mind is in the daze now.
I ain't thinking about nothing. Yeah.
right, we are back from the break, and that song is entitled Navigating the Maze by Vapors. That song is about quieting the noise around you and being focused on your goals, not allowing other things to get in the way, and that is actually available anywhere you stream your music.
On all platforms. So, let's go ahead and let's see. We're going to hit the book of the month. And of course, again, the book of the month is Married Roommates: How to Go from a Relationship That Just Survives to a Marriage That Thrives by Talia Wagner. This week we are discussing chapter 5, which is called Conflicts and Combat. So let's dive on it.
Yes, and we are obviously going to start with a story time because it's obviously my favorite part of the show. So, we're going to talk about JP and Jordan. And the title of this little story is Critiques and Criticisms, okay? So, let me get my theatricalness on. I'm ready. Jordan rolled her eyes in response to JP's diatribe on the dishes. She knew it drove him crazy when the dishes piled up in the sink. But that was the way she had always done it prior to their moving in together. Honestly, she had bigger fish to fry. It annoyed her that during her busiest work days, she still had to conform and do it his way. Being ex-military left him pretty rigid about household duties in a way she did not appreciate. It felt controlling. Every time he lectured her about tidiness, she felt like a failing 50s housewife. And even worse, that she had moved in with her dad. Her dad used to chastise and berate her mom about the household duties. It was all she heard growing up. When JP asked why she didn't just do the dishes, it upset her to her core. Instead of just telling him what upset her, she usually responded by making snide, sarcastic remarks about his rigidity. JP, I know, right? JP hated the way Jordan rolled her eyes when she disagreed with him. It seemed like common sense that the dishes should be done regularly. But with Jordan, it felt like his request fell on deaf ears. This became a major source of contention in the past few months as she increasingly got more comfortable and sadly messier in all aspects of the home. He found himself making daily comments or admittedly even slightly passive-aggressive digs when he came home from his long day at work only to see the dishes that had accumulated since the afternoon. It triggered many of their fights. For JP, this conflict went deeper than just the dishes. It was about respect and love. As a child, the oldest child of a single mom, he had stepped up to take on household responsibilities to make it easier on his mom, so she didn't have to do more when she finally shuffled in exhausted after her long work day. He had loved to see her face light up when she saw a clean kitchen, dinner started, or even beds made. His early home life is not something he opened up with about to Jordan. It seemed like a given that she should just understand. Not only didn't she get it, but she doubled down on her disrespect, demeaning, and humiliation of him. The name calling, insinuating that he act like her dad, or just or that this was just a part of some sort of unhealthy military inflexibility hurt and took his frustration to the next level. He found himself engaged in a tit-for-tat, punishing her in other ways for not understanding his needs. Lately, he had even been wondering if he should just end it, despite otherwise strong connections that they shared. So, while I rest my reading mouth, you can tell me how you felt about that.
The dishes, though. No, I'm just
I know.
that the dishes was a character.
They were.
It was a character. So I was like, I wonder what the dish is gonna be gonna do the next. But I would say disagreeing is normal. Some conflict in relationship is inevitable, for there are many times when two people's differing opinions and or needs will clash and run counter to the other one. Legitimate and illegitimate sources of irritable and disapproval will inevitably lead to a disappointed and dispute. This is normal and is to be expected, especially in marriage, when many times you do not get an individual vote.
I wanted to know what you thought.
Well, I mean, I thought that too.
No, I was looking. I was like, "Wait, he's reading the next part."
Yeah.
I wanted to know your thoughts.
That's my thought too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What is your thoughts though?
I mean, it's already pretty much said. You know what I mean? Some things are inevitably going to be, it's like going through that. It might hurt a little bit. There's going to be a little bit of downs. There's going to be, if it's not, then something ain't right. Something is weird. Something is off. You know what I mean? That's why all those like perfect relationships, I know you hate that word, but those relationships that are just like, oh my God, you see them, this and that, and then they end up divorced in like a month later. Because they haven't went through that fire and then come out together stronger because they went through that fire. So a lot of times, conflict is just inevitable. You know what I mean? And disagreements and all that stuff is normal. I feel like you got to go through it.
What I will say is, the root cause of that conflict is what they weren't saying. Just like last week's podcast.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, did he tell her that when he was growing up, his mama worked long hours and she was a single parent, and the way that he showed love was by doing the dishes? So the way that he sees love is by acts of service.
Yes.
And that's his love language. She
right.
doesn't know this.
She doesn't feel that way.
She's just like,
Right.
dude, all my dad did is yell at my mother about dishes, and I refuse to be yelled at about dishes. That is not my love language.
Gotcha.
So because they've not had that conversation, that is why this is happening.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was gonna. That part about it, I was really just going into the fact that conflicts does just happen. Things just happen still, but it's the things that's unsaid that start these disagreements sometimes, and that's where that learning comes in. Yeah. You have to learn that. You have to pay attention to it. So, without going through that, how would you know? How would you know when, or that's what he felt? How would you know that's what she felt? Right. Without having that conflict at that time.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm looking at the good that comes in the outcome, I guess.
I guess.
I don't know.
So I'm about to switch something up, and you're gonna give me the side eye, okay?
No.
Yep. I think you should read the next story.
All
Get
right,
your hand off. No, get your hand off my shoulder. That hurts. I'm just playing.
Oh my God! I wasn't even touching you.
I know. You did put your hand on my shoulder.
Yes, for 2 seconds.
You read the story, and I'll read the part after the story. Yes, I flipped it up. And scene.
Elliot parked his car in an allotted space in their apartment complex, knowing that they would be using his car for the long trip to his parents the next day. He made a point of cleaning the clutter and old cups and that had been stacking up for the past week. Admittedly, he was a bit of a slob, but he usually took the effort to clean the mess before Ava got in his car. He threw most of it out in the downstairs bin before heading upstairs to their apartment, but thought twice before throwing in the almost full Starbucks cups from earlier that day, not wanting to give the building's cleaner more work to do. So when he walked in, Ava took one look at the Starbucks cup and gave him a dirty look. Just another example of what a selfish prick you are. She said, eyes focused accusingly on the cup. What are you talking about? Elliot asked, confused by her hostility. You got yourself a coffee, but as usual, didn't even think about me? She said. You know what? Question mark. Why don't you just go to your parents alone then? I'm done. In an instant, they were at each other's throats, screaming at one another and crossing red lines. Ava felt justified to talk about Elliot's parents. Becoming demeaning and disrespectful, Elliot spiraled right along with her, calling Ava a crazy, low-class bitch. The fight ended.
Jinx, we did it at the same time.
When he stormed out and went to see his parents on his own, but the nastiness and the disrespect they showed each other continued for days afterward, neither recognizing or understanding that others hurt, which was underlining the anger and frustration Ava already been on edge about their visit to his family house, which always ended in a fight when he failed to stand up to his dad, who was consistently condescending towards her. Elliot got upset because it seemed that Ava always tried to get out of the visits with his parents by coming up with the same tired old argument that seemed to conveniently forget all the times that he stood up for her. So it's not about getting coffee. Clearly, it's not about getting coffee.
No, but it's just, I felt so bad. First of all, I feel bad for him when I heard this or when I read it, because the dude was trying to do something for her, and then he was trying to be nice to the person who cleans up. And the moment he walked in, first of all, I'm sorry, and I'm a girl, but I don't just follow shit just because it's female. Okay. She was so wrong. Okay. He couldn't get through the door without, like, the way
her looking at the coffee cup.
She should have been like, coffee, you didn't bring me none? Then he could have said, babe, this is from 9 a.m. I just didn't want to drop it in the trash downstairs, and you know, Keyshawn, whatever his name is, get coffee everywhere. They could be like, oh, that's so nice. That's where that could have went. But what was going on with her, that the moment she saw his face, it's almost like she just didn't like his face. I don't think it was about the coffee. Like, she was just already on 12.
It was about her dad.
No, his dad,
from
yes.
previously.
Yeah, she just was like,
and how
what
he's
can I do to not have to go see these people? That's where she was.
Right.
And so I think she was. She was really whack for this. And for the first words she says to him, "You are such a selfish prick."
Right.
There was no way he could have taken and spun that. Like, you would have to be freaking Buddha to be like, and with love. Like, you know what I mean? Who's gonna do that on this plane in 3D land?
But I still cleaneth thine car for you.
No.
Well, I mean, I just feel bad for the car. Because it's the innocent in this.
Oh my God!
It got trash all over.
That's what your thoughts were.
I mean, and then
he's got a lot of cups.
The car has to witness this argument.
Look, he's got a lot of cups. However, how is it that his dad is always being condescending to her? That's is so
weird.
Lame.
It's very
Where
weird.
does that come from?
It's very strange.
You would think a mother would be condescending to the chick, and that's still whack. But that's like more like, oh, you understand? You know, these women have issues when their sons grow up and get married, and they still want to be the only girl in their lives.
The thing is that you have to understand the type of relationships that some people have, maybe closer to mothers, maybe closer to fathers. You know, you never know.
And it's probably a lack of his parents probably don't respect their relationship, and he has not required them to.
Or his
know what I'm saying?
His parents probably hasn't gotten that same respect from their grandparents.
Ding, ding, ding.
So that's kind of where it all begins.
Yes, it's a vicious cycle of
it's a
everybody
cycle,
disrespecting
it's
each
constant.
other.
But at the end of the day, what can solve all of these problems, even last podcast, is communication.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why didn't they have a discussion after the last time that they sat down and talked about how his dad is blah 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 blah? And, you know what I mean? And then it would have released some of that tension, and she wouldn't have cared about the coffee.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Yeah, it was wrong that she came in and said that, but still, you know,
she was whack.
It's yes, but it's a build up that sometimes you really can't explain.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And you know, I guess that's what that is.
So, explosive fights and escalations. In some relationships, it seems as though any difference of opinion, no matter how slight, can cause an explosive fight. Mm-hmm. And these escalations eventually become an everyday occurrence. Issues that other couples can resolve easily become roadblocks for those roommates who entrenched in this pattern. Mm-hmm. Even conversations that start off friendly enough can quickly devolve into a heated, escalated place. Misunderstandings and differings of opinion are easily misinterpreted as personal attacks and critiques, and then used as the basis or defense for the subsequent counterattack. It's almost as if people already have their finger on the trigger. These attacks do not allow couples to see each other's true pain. Mm-hmm. The combative dynamic of some married roommates allow for creates. Listen, I copied and pasted this, so I am not the one. The combative dynamic that some married roommates allow for creates a destructive undercurrent that teams one against the other, affecting everything else that is going on.
Mm-hmm.
So proceed.
No, go ahead. Go. What were you about to say?
Oh, I wasn't about to say anything.
No, I was going to say, so that leads to escalation, triggers fight or flight, which is the next section. When couples go from 0 to 60 over what appears to be the smallest thing, they hurl accusations, threats, names, and even curse each other out. Unfortunately, during those moments, your own psychology works against you, as escalation hijacks your ability to communicate effectively by setting off your fight or flight instinct. The fight or flight instinct is your body's evolutionary alarm system kicking in. Your brain triggers this response in order to protect you from what it perceives as a threat. Whether there is real danger lurking around is irrelevant to this instinctual reaction. The material for all of this combustion originates from hurt and hopelessness. All normal, acceptable feelings that instantly erupt into intense anger or rage in an escalated situation. What would happen if we could see things this way? Interpret your partner's yelling as not a personal attack, but a cry for help, crying out that they are in pain and desperate to be heard.
You like that question? I wrote it myself. I sure did.
Well,
I feel like it's a valid question.
Well,
like, what would happen? I don't mean to take over in the middle of your paragraph, but
no.
But seriously, what would happen if when your partner is yelling, you could like see past the yelling and see that this person is literally crying for help? And not in a way of, you deranged idiot. It's more like, oh shit, what do they need that they're not getting?
Well, even in that, in the midst of that moment, trying to understand what they need still can trigger and set them off.
Yes and no.
Yes and yes.
Listen, if you're sitting there, okay. Let me take that back.
Look, take it from experience. But at the end of the day, you know, it's a matter of sitting back and listening, but also don't listen too hard to the point where you have nothing to say, because then you also will be attacked because you're not saying enough.
True.
So, so at the end of the day, it's a hard place to be in.
Yeah, I get it.
No matter what. You know what I mean?
I concur.
You just have to navigate the maze through that.
Ding, ding, ding.
So it's just, it's just a tough place to be in.
Moving right
Not
along.
everybody kind of exude that, but, yeah. Not everybody's created equal, so.
Yeah.
But once sparked, the reaction simply turns on without your control or even awareness. You may feel your muscles tense, your heart rate go up, your chest might palpitate, your palms may become clammy. Other symptoms may be a tense neck, warm forehead, itchy shoulders or skin, arrested breathing, watery and barely blinking eyes, shaking limbs, and unable to be. This sounds like people need to go to the hospital.
No, it doesn't. You wanna know why?
All psychological
things.
signs that your body is getting you ready to deal with this threat.
I experience all these things.
Yes. And I would say, I think people who don't experience this and who don't get this, I think they need to evaluate their self-worth, because they felt like their own self is not enough to fight or fight for, to ever get to that place.
That's an interesting...
Very interesting take. Only reason why I'm saying that is because
I appreciate it, though.
I am that.
Yeah.
I don't get to this stuff. I don't have anxiety. I don't have all that stuff. But that's also because my lack of self-care and love throughout my life. So I evaluated it by how you go off on me, and I'm like, man, I really wish and wonder sometimes what it feels like.
I gotta tell everybody I go off.
Well, I mean,
But I go off.
I mean, listen, it's another level.
go off.
It's another level. Darth Vader is like her cousin, but
What did we just hear about Denzel? King Kong. He got shit on me.
right, more like Scarlet Witch. But no, I would say, I over time I just evaluated that, and I really start to, as I start to gain a sense of self, I start having a sense of awareness in terms of looking outwardly at what self looks like, or self-love looks like, in terms of the people around me, or whatever the case may be, trying to learn. And of course I have those moments where I look real stupid because I don't understand it, and people think I should, because it's like a thing that it's kind of weird that you don't feel a certain way about yourself, but that's just what I have to deal with in order to learn. So that's like my pain that I have to go through. And then watching you, it makes me really feel like, man, like I've never fought for myself like that. So it makes you evaluate that.
I think it's interesting that you see that.
I think I'm just saying it for, if there's anyone that feels that same way, that could be something to really look at and think about, because you don't realize that you are lacking self-love and worth until you really realize it. You know what I mean?
Because I think, I can say, well, I'll say one thing and then I'll move on. For me, when I go, what makes me go to 10 is the fact that in reality, and I've said this to you before, I'm a thinker. I think about things a million times before they leave my mouth, whether they're hurtful things or good things. Like when I pop off, that's a sonnet I've already written in my head. It's not coming off the cuff. It's I wrote this basically. Right. So because I'm such a thinker, whenever I bring something to you, like if it's an idea, right, I've already taken what I've wanted, cut it in half, and I'm bringing you the compromise from my perspective, because I've not, I don't even ever I rarely even bring what I actually want to the table as a request to anyone. Because I automatically have dialed it down and thought about the other person I'm bringing it to and what they want. And so I've already created this compromise in my head.
Right.
So when I bring it and then I have to cut it down more, that takes me to 10.
So then you get angry.
Because I'm like, how dare you, when you already know, if you know me, you would know that I've already taken into consideration all of the stuff that matters to you. So when I bring this to you, this isn't even what I want. This is the compromise. So I have to cut it down even more. Then it becomes not a compromise. It becomes what you want and not what I want. And so then I'm pissed.
Right. But at the same time, too, you know, that is also shooting yourself in the foot. Because you compromising is exuding a lack of self. And it also goes to not setting boundaries properly.
Correct, which is a huge problem.
Right. So
for me,
when you don't set those boundaries and you come to the table with only, you know, you want 10, but you come to the table with just with 2. You know, and you're like,
and then someone takes one of those.
Somebody takes it. They're gonna
take
You can't
one.
expect that somebody's gonna give you 100% of what your 100% to them is, because your 100% is fake. You know, your boundary is not being set by making it a known. So it's like, I'm gonna give her 1. You know, I'm gonna give her a half, but I ain't giving her 2. You know what I mean? That's a normal kind of response by anyone. So what ultimately happens is you get a rush of anger.
Yeah.
Because you're like, man, all I wanted, I want 10, but I'm asking you for 2, and you can't even give me a half of 1?
Right.
Like, what? You know, so yeah.
Well, honestly, this is a self-mastery. This is where the yoga, the meditation, the self-discipline, or obviously the lack thereof comes into play. It's funny because people who engage in these practices prove often how beneficial it is to have your, you know, to your own self-government. But a lot of people still see it as like woo-woo or fluffy, you know? It's sad. It's sad how hard people will fight to continue things that are proven to not work.
Yeah.
And then they fight against things that clearly do.
Yep.
It's like, clearly, it's not a cure, you know, to do these things. And you'll not be, like, perfect. That word I hate. But it gives you at least a freaking fighting chance. You know what I mean? In order to get as close to self-mastery as possible. Because self-mastery is literally a journey. It's not a destination, you know?
Right.
So as your body reacts, your cognitive brain is put on standby. You seemingly have no control of what happens next. Once the brain has assessed danger, the red emergency light comes on, furiously blinking as internally in the brain prepares for the threat by shutting down all the non-essential functions to deal with the oncoming problem. It does so by increasing the bodily fluids that aid the fight or flight response. It releases certain hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol to increase your heart rate, your blood pressure, and boost your energy, your glucose supply to the bloodstream.
Yep.
During this time, the cognitive brain or the thinking apparatus is not in control, which can lead you to act irrationally and destructively. When in the grips of fight or flight moment, you are not physiologically capable of talking calmly. The non-essential departments that the brain just turn off and are the very ones needed to understand, empathize, and resolve.
Yep.
So all of that's gone.
You can't see clearly.
So exactly. So while in this state, the dialogue between two people usually doesn't go well because it cannot. That's why I've gotten to the point where I'll be like, stop. You're not good with that though yet. We're getting there.
Yeah,
but a lot of times
I have a lack of understanding.
Yes, because the stop will come random. You could be mid-sentence.
Yeah.
You could be mid-sentence, but I can feel everything that they just talked about on a biological.
And for those who don't understand that, it's like you may feel that we ain't even began our conversation yet.
Yes.
But you don't know that when you said what do you mean? Because she was, hype about something, and you said, what you mean? If you say that,
It could be anything.
that could be a trigger. And at that point, that's when it's like, okay, she's going to take it up a notch.
Yeah,
and,
like
but
if you
to
hear stop.
To you, you're just like, you're really just concerned and trying to figure out, what do you mean? Like, what's happening? But for the other person, it's like we about to like throw blows.
Yes. And so when you hear stop, or if you're the me in this situation and you say stop, and the other person don't stop, that's the moment that you have signed on for what comes next in my world. Well, and I don't have to feel bad about it afterwards because you decided you wanted it.
Well, let's think about this though. Think about all the things that medically happen to people when they're in this state of mind. How your whole body structure changed because frequency is everything.
Yeah.
So you start literally vibrating at a different frequency that causes your body to create glucose. You know what I mean? Your heart rate, blood pressure,
cortisol.
So think about like people who may live with this and go through this and then really start to dive into, man, my weight issues, my this issues, my heart problems, and it could all be literally linked to the fact and the lack of you honestly setting boundaries, taking the time to meditate, taking time for self,
being
focusing
honest
on self. These little steps could probably end up saving your life. You know what I mean? And a lot of people who are looking, on the outside in, like, well, they just, fat because they eat too much and you never know what somebody is going through.
There are people who live in fight or flight 100% of the time.
Exactly.
I know that because I do.
Exactly.
Or I have in the past.
Like, wake up with stress. Go to bed with stress. You know what I mean? And it's like, that cycle will cause a lot of internal,
combustion.
Man. And that's why it's like, somebody could be wearing a 3-piece suit. They take the suit off and they literally have a shirt with holes in it because it was a front. You know what I mean? You never know what somebody's really going through.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. So.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Well.
But unfortunately, when you escalate in an argument with your partner, when assessing this danger, your brain doesn't account for the fact that you love this person and do not really want to hurt them. In the moment, they are a threat to your survival. And you will do whatever is necessary to survive.
Basically. All right. Well, yes, that was lengthy, but that does it for if I can find my words, sorry. So that is just a sample of what chapter 5 has to offer. When I tell you that all of that came from like the first 5-6 pages.
Yeah.
Definitely take a deeper dive when your time permits. Next week we will be discussing chapter 6, which is called Disappearing Connections. This is the 3rd chapter in part 2 of the book, which is called The Great Relationship Decline and Redefine. If you are following along with us, we will be reviewing a chapter a week.
The book out. Yeah.
So give us time to, of course, digest and reflect on the information we have received. Gotcha.
All right, so it is time for pick a card, any card. And we are again pulling from, every time I say it, The End.
The End.
That's it. Long-term couples edition cards.
These cards are so hard to get out of the box.
They are black in color.
Do you hear me, End?
For color coding purposes. And today, the card is...
I like this one. What excites you most about our future?
The endless, possibilities.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Take my answer.
how amazing things, even when things are not good or things are low or things are just okay, how sometimes you look, or I look and I think, I'm like, wow, we still did all that though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we still did all that. So imagine if we were fully, like, 100% ourselves. You know what I mean? Like, you know,
Not fight or
optimal
flight.
selves.
Yeah.
Optimal selves. I mean, yeah, that's what my take is.
Yeah.
Is that your answer too?
It was totally my answer.
No. Well,
So
there you go.
thanks for taking it. Appreciate it. But we are obviously way over our normal running time today. So that is going to be it for today's podcast. We will be back next week with more content to share and discuss. All of the articles used to drive today's discussion forward can be found in the description box, as well as the links to the book of the month, Married Roommates: How to Go from a Relationship That Just Survives to a Marriage That Thrives, by Talia Wagner. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's podcast. We will see you next week, and be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and of course, ignite your energy.
Twin flame energy, twin flame energy, twin